Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all at this webinar, healthcare research and serious gaming. My name is Johan and I'm working as a relationship officer at campus Fryslan, part of the University of Groningen. And today I will be the presenter and the moderator of this webinar. I'm happy that so many people joined the session, especially during this strange day when there is a big storm coming over the Netherlands. But before we do the introduction, before I will explain what we're going to do today, I'm very curious to hear who is our audience today. So I would like to ask you kindly to put your position or your title in the chat, the organization where you are working and where you from. So please let me know, where are you now, where are you from, and where do you work? Let's wait for a couple of reactions. And if there are no reactions, we will continue anyways. So I will give you a 10 seconds time. So let me know, who are you? I'm very curious because we are sitting in this room in Leeuwarden, but I'm very curious who is behind the desk at the other side. Saxion University, Enschede, a postdoctoral research in Amsterdam, a physical therapy department. Others, PhD in Rotterdam, Amsterdam. What do we see? Working on VR and mental health, very interesting. Inge Duitert, UMCG postdoc, welcome. Thank you.
Welcome, very nice.
Yeah, really, really nice. Highly appreciate that you are here today. Let's give you a virtual welcome to the University of Groningen and especially campus Fryslân. We are a unique faculty based in Leeuwarden, and we are a multi and transdisciplinary faculty where we, with our students from bachelor, master level and PhD candidates, doing transdisciplinary research, and our mission is to find local solutions to our global challenges. And I think today is a perfect example of this transdisciplinarity. And we hope to inspire you during this webinar to also do transdisciplinary research or transdisciplinary education. We are currently all in this Zoom call, and you can, if there are any questions during the presentation, please let us know via the chat. We have a lovely assistant here who will give show me all the questions we have. And if we don't answer your questions directly, there will be enough time for the Q&A after several parts, but also in the end, there will be enough time for all your questions. This session will take 2 hours maximum, and we will stop at 5 o'clock. Enough about the University of Groningen, enough about Campus Fryslân. This webinar is a co-creation and collaboration with 8D Games, a serious gaming company here in Leeuwarden, and a reliable and experienced partner on serious gaming and working with our scientists. And if you turn your head slightly to the right, you will see the smiley. You think 8D Games, is it 3D, 4D, or whatever where it stands for, but it's just a fun smiley. Before we dive deep in several topics like serious gaming, gamification, use of VR in ICU recovery, design thinking, data storage, ethical things, and of course the extensive Q&A, I would like to introduce you to our players of today. The first player, player one, is Lise Beumeler. She's sitting next to me. Welcome, Lise.
Thank you.
Lise is postdoctoral research here at Campus Fryslân, but also at the Medical Center Leeuwarden, MCL Leeuwarden. and you understand Frisian, but you didn't grow up here, right?
No, I am from Limburg, but now I live in Groningen. And please don't ask me which one is better, Fryslân or Groningen, because I will not answer this question in this webinar.
Okay, that's good. And you did a bachelor and master in biomedical sciences, if I understood correctly.
Yes.
And you graduated this year as a doctor of philosophy, right?
Yes, I did. So I did my PhD research on recovery after critical illness. And somewhere along the way, I got to know Johan, but also Johan. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Thank you. And we have the other expert on the other side. This is Johan van der Meulen. Johan is co-owner and creative director of AD Games. Johan is dad of Sven in Frisian height and the husband of Sophia. And I heard from reliable sources that another baby is coming in fall, right?
That's very true. Thank you for
Congratulations.
during this webinar.
And he has a Duolingo streak of 132, which some people find impressive. I find it really impressive.
No.
You don't?
No, it's a bit low.
It's a bit low?
Yeah.
I've heard from multiple sources that it's low.
Okay.
So
But you still have it understand.
I do my best.
Did I forget something? Did you like to add something?
No,
Johan?
certainly not.
No?
Perfect introduction. Thank
Okay.
you.
Lise, do you want to add something about Johan or about yourself?
Well, the nice thing to always mention when we have these kind of events is that the first time I met Johan, he forgot about me. So the second time that we got reintroduced, I had to remind him of the first time we met. So well,
Not a good first.
I am happy he remembers now, and that's why we are here today, I think.
In my defense, it was in one of your first days of your PhD,
I know.
and also still very browsing on what to do. And yeah,
So you're blaming me.
no,
Okay.
definitely. No.
You'll take her
It's
out.
co-blame.
Okay.
Co-creating the blame. Okay.
This was the introduction part. What is the language which Johan is learning? I get a question.
Excellent question. I was learning German, sorry.
German.
Deutsch.
Deutsch.
German
German.
through Duolingo. I now have more traditional workbooks, and I also read children's books. Maybe I shouldn't mention that, but it helps me to place the language in context.
But for a specific purpose or just for fun?
For fun.
For fun.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, enough about your language Duolingo streaks. Let's talk about the business you're daily busy with.
Yeah.
Let's do a deep dive. Johan, what is gamification? I will give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Also, welcome all. Very nice to see that you are here. I would like to talk a bit about what are serious games and what is gamification and what's the difference, to help you understand also the examples that we will give you later on around the research projects, also the one that Lisa has been working on. So hopefully this will give you enough context and inspire you for your own research purposes. If you have any questions during my slides, feel free to ask anything in the chat, and it will get to us.
Yeah.
All right. To start off, is there someone in the audience who knows this example? Just yes is enough. You can also write what if you know the title, but very nice, very nice. And very good example of gamification. What you see here is, as some of you know, the piano stairs. And what it does is it influences the behavior of, I love to say players, but the visitors of this metro station to, instead of taking the escalator, take the stairs, which of course improves health, exercise, etc. Why this is gamification is because it influences an existing situation. So it's not a game in itself. It transforms an otherwise maybe boring situation and motivates the behavior of the players in a way that has, well, benefits, societal or health or etc. what serious games? One of the first ones, Folded, is a serious game based around folding the proteins as they have been visualized as DNA. So, small interruption. Folded has been created by several universities, and what it does is it gives a community of players the tools through this game to fold the protein into certain shapes which help the creation of medicine or food, etc. So what it does in its core, it helps to support science. And why is this approach being used like this? To compute endless forms of this protein via computers takes a lot of time and effort, and also with endless possibilities. What does the computer have to compute to? And the human brain has a very unique set of skills to create a shape based on endless possibilities. So not only scientists can support and contribute to this, also enthusiasts. So this way, you have a very large community of people who can contribute to science. So it has a societal impact, but in itself, it's a game because you have to fold and puzzle this protein into certain shapes. To give you a bit of an example of the things that we have done to give you more context on what are serious games is, for instance, the ice skating balance training game. It's a game created with the University of Groningen and the UMCG, which is the medical hospital in Groningen. And what it does is it transforms a otherwise very boring physiotherapeutical exercise for the elderly into an ice skating simulation in a home setting. So the problem that occurred here is that the exercise that players had to do in a home setting was extremely boring. They had to do the same exercise for 20 minutes a day, every day. And what the doctors and physiotherapeutics noticed is that the players just didn't do it, and they couldn't even validate if the players had done it before or trained according to the schedule. And in this way, we transform the otherwise boring exercise into, for the player, not a training or an exercise per se, but into a ice skating simulation in which they have to set high scores in fast times or have to duck under bridges, avoid ice holes. So for the players, it's a game. In its core, it's a game. And they are not busy or otherwise distracted with doing the exercise. Other things that contribute to this concept is that because we measured the exercise that the player does, we did this with the Kinect back then. So it's an infrared camera. So you could use any infrared camera. We measure the movement that the player does. And in the background, we can influence behavior or the exercise that the player does. So we can nudge the player into doing the correct exercise. So holding a straight back, don't not too sharp an angle with your knees, for instance. We store all this data, we send it to the professionals at the UMCG. So when they have their one-on-one sessions, they can see all the data and they can see that, for instance, the player has done the exercises. Also, if they see some sort of deviation, so more difficulty on the left or right, which gives a very good foundation for the one-on-one consults to make them more qualitative better.
So the professionals analyze the data and the video of the patients, or so as you call them, the players.
Yeah.
To do this.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Let me check. But not only in the field of exercise. So to give you a bit of a scope of regions in which serious games is being used, also to spark your inspiration, of course. Decision making with zoonose. So we have had a zoonose outbreak not too long ago. It was COVID-19. Zoonose, for people who don't know it, it's a disease that is being transferred from animals to humans. And when this happens, a lot of decision making has to be done. And not only in, let's say, national level, but also in more regional levels. And to make the decision making, and this was even before COVID-19. So the University of Twente, also a PhD student that worked on this with the ice skating game the same. They were very early with this concept. What they wanted to do is they wanted to start a discussion with the different layers of, for instance, municipalities or government agencies on how to respond to certain zoonosis outbreaks. And also to give a view of this, an overview of the decisions that are being made to the, for instance, the players for residents of just people. That's what I try to say. So all peoples of just daily life people, to help them understand the decisions that are being made and how complex they can be. So for instance, if you have a hunch that the zoonosis outbreak is starting at a local farm, for instance, do you, as a government, let for instance, the child of this farmer do their exam at school? So this, of course, is not an easy decision. You can choose to fully prevent and to block the player for the child, in this case, do their exam and to do a year over, or you let them participate because you are not sure yet. These decisions are complex. They are gray, as to say. And how can you respond to this, and how can you train for this? This is what the zoonosis game was about, the EZO. And how certain people answer to these complex dilemmas. This is the result for the research during this PhD project. And how can you plan for this? So, and yeah, also with PhD projects comes a poster presentation. So to give you a bit of an idea, that's also one of the things that we support. But now I have shown you a lot of technical solutions, but serious games doesn't necessarily have to be technical. So for instance, a game based around the negotiation of taking over a family business, which can be very emotional, of course. For instance, in a agricultural setting in which the parents, they think that their children first in line will take over their farm, but the children maybe have very different plans, or maybe they think the same, but they have never discussed it before. And the moment that they try to apply for a bank loan, it's too late. So how can you facilitate this discussion, or at least this topic? Well, for this target audience, not with a technical game, but with a board game. So On Tafel is a game in which you have to play from a different perspective than the role that you normally have in the family. And you have to defend the needs of your character. So what you try to do during the game is that with your family members or with other professionals, you defend your own agenda, as to say. But at the end, you want a few things. You want to have a good sum for your company, of course, to sell, but it doesn't. You have to prevent that it's too high for the next one taking over to be able to apply for a loan to buy it, of course. You want to ensure company continuity. So you also want, you don't want to take over a company in which in the last 30 years there hasn't been any improvement in hardware or machinery. So all these things have to be updated. And at the end, of course, the most important thing, and also the key point of this dilemma, is that at the end you want to celebrate Christmas together in a happy fashion. So how can you defend your own needs in a company discussion takeover and still be able to make it fit for everyone and to, well, at least be happy together. Yeah. So, and during this also with a researcher from the Van Hal Larenstein and NL Stenden, also in Leeuwarden, they also research well, how players react to this and how can they make, for instance, school curriculum to fit to help support this new generation. With impressions, also the different characters you can play, different roles.
So it's always about a complex problem
Yeah.
with different layers, and by playing the game together or individually, they get an understanding of each other's view, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and the main goal is that they start thinking about that this is going to happen and that they have to start thinking on it more earlier than they wanted to, probably. Yeah. All right, but that's enough talk from me. We're
Nice
going to the
examples.
next level, which is of course why you came here from a researcher's perspective. Please.
That's me, I think. Thank you. Well, again, thank you all for joining this webinar. And first of all, thank you, Johan, for the nice explanation in the difference between gamification and serious gaming and the examples. I think it is very unique, right? That in the development you already from the beginning include research opportunities in this process, right?
You don't see this happen all the time. I think this is a fundamental mistake. To create good serious games, you need a solid foundation of research and evidence-based practices.
Yeah, I think so too. And I am really happy to be here because I will talk you through some like a practical example of what I worked with in my PhD project. But first of all, I would like to know who of you works in healthcare. So can you share in the chat if you work in healthcare? That would be nice to know from me.
Based on their organizations and position, there were some couple of people working in the healthcare or doing research within the healthcare.
Okay, that's nice. Well, it will
So
not
at
be a
least
very
two, I do mental health, I see, so
great. Well,
there are people working in the healthcare industry.
it's good to know that more people are interested in this. So, but it will not be a very technical story. It will be very easy to listen to the story, and I will not use any medical terms. So no worries for the people that don't work in healthcare.
Thank you, that's nice.
Also both Johan and Niels. So my PhD project was about recovery after critical illness, and somewhere along the way, due to a certain pandemic that we already spoke about, Johan and I decided to join forces and to look into how gaming and serious games could be of benefit in the rehabilitation of ICU patients. So that was what we did over the past 2 years, I think. And here on the slide, you see how can virtual reality gaming help in the recovery process. But I will tell you that we did not start with the virtual reality tool, but we ended up there. So I will guide you through the process of how we got there, and also share with you why I think this is a very special and one of my favorite projects that I worked on during the past 4 years. So this is where I work. Also, I work here at Campus Fryslân, but also in the Medical Centrum Leeuwarden, and specifically in the ICU department, so the intensive care unit. And during COVID, the intensive care unit, or the impact of intensive care admission, became a bit famous, sadly, but also there were some benefits because there was a lot more awareness about what it meant for people to be in the ICU. We were already aware of the impact of ICU admission and critical illness on people that were in the ICU, but now it was also known in the world, and this specific paper in Dutch was in a local newspaper of one of the people that were in our ICU with COVID. And the main point is that people go home and they are happy that they survived being so ill, but when they get home, they realize what they have lost, but also how hard it can be to get back to what they were doing in their lives and what was important to them. So that can also be very demotivating and really hard. And that's also what you see here on the slide, that Grietje was also at the end of her capacity in, she didn't know what to do because there was such a big challenge ahead when she already faced one while being in the ICU. So this is also why we set up this research project and why I think this is a very relevant topic. Because when people are admitted to the ICU, we sometimes compare this with running a marathon. And I'm sorry for my bad pain skills. But they have to run a second marathon when they are discharged from the ICU. And that without preparation, so you didn't have a year to practice running this marathon. You just, especially for people that are admitted acutely, you just got into the situation and have to get out some way. So like I told you before, our project ended up using the VR headset, but we didn't start there. So our main goal was to look into ways how we could make practicing or physical therapy more fun and easier for our patients. And from a very early point in the ICU rehabilitation. So to give you some context, whenever someone is awake and able to do something in the ICU, they will be mobilized together with the physical therapist or the nurse. So this will be moving the hands at first, but also sitting on the edge of the bed. And for your understanding, so when people are awake, sometimes the only thing they can do is move a finger. So this means that they are very limited in the movement, and everything is very heavy. There's also a lot of pain and fatigue, so a lot of barriers to movement. And that is also one of the things that makes it harder for them to adhere to the training, because they have to train multiple times a day, because we want them to rebuild muscle. So what we did was go and we investigated, I don't really know which one. Okay, so we investigated opportunities for games or serious games for this training.
2 slides up.
2 slides up?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I will be back to this slide. So what we did was, before we ended up with the virtual reality headset and the VR game, we performed a few demos. After we had a brainstorm session with Johan and the colleagues, and we just tried several applied. So we used the VR headset, but also sensor tools, as you see on the slide, and the ice skating game to see what would fit our situation. So in this picture, you see some of our colleagues practicing, and we also asked former patients and their relatives to try and work with this hardware, because we wanted to investigate if this was even a possibility for people that are in the ICU. And of course, at first you think, oh, the VR headset is, well, maybe not that suitable for our target group, because the average age is like 67 years old. But everyone was really enthusiastic, and the most remarkable thing is that we saw that specifically this person, she came in with a walking aid, but with the VR headset on, she was able to dance and to make certain movements that we didn't expect to see. And that is also the power of VR, I think. And then I will go back a few slides. So what we know about VR is that it really distracts you. So, and that is very beneficial for the ICU, but also makes people feel less pain or be less aware of the pain. And you are able to motivate in a specific way. Same as the Kinect, you can nudge a bit and make sure that people make specific movements that you want them to make. And another very big benefit for us was that we could facilitate for the people in the ICU that they would step out of the ICU room, because the ICU room isn't very well friendly or nice. So that is what we did, and I think here's another example of some of the former patients that practice with us, and on the right you can see also one of the patients looking at a very small object in the training, which was really nice to see how people investigate this new world. And on the left, the skating game again.
If I may add to this slide, I think the most interesting thing to see is how immersive VR is, also in a setting like this. And I think if you have never tried it before, it's hard to really understand or to really bring over the immersiveness of this tool. And of course, we say VR, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You really have to look very closely at your own context and setting and how you can use this. Also, a funny thing, which I thought of during this process, is that the professionals, so the nurses, etc., and the doctors, they were more leaning on the idea of more sensors that don't distract players, so they're not VRs that they are totally immersed, but for instance, an ice skating game in which they are still in contact with their surroundings. They thought that would fit the needs of the patients better. But yeah, during the research, the patients, they showed a different need. And I think as a researcher and as a designer, it's good to keep an open mind on this, to know all the needs and to know the preferences of the professionals, but also to really see what's happening. For instance, in the slide here, that it's so immersive that it improves movement, and which is one of the goals.
We have also a question from the audience. Before using the VR headset, were there other things considered in this design? Creating this setup?
Excellent question, thank you. Definitely. And I think what you want to do during a design process is to fail as soon as possible, is what they say. So we tried a lot of interventions that already exist. So we didn't start off by building something completely new, which takes a lot of time and resources, but just try what's already there and just see how people respond to this. So we've tried different VR sets, for instance. So the one that we ended up with during this process, this is the Oculus Quest 2. We are looking at different ones already right now. The technology is going very, very fast. We used the Oculus Go, which was a more, didn't have spatial recognition. So it didn't recognize if you moved around the room and then translated that into the 3D experience. You had to move around using a controller, which also, well, is for some people more difficult to grasp, difficult for the brain, I mean. So it creates motion sickness more easily, which with the spatial recognition is less.
But if I understand correctly, you also tried other things than VR.
So we tried the skating game, which was really nice, but not very suitable for in the ICU because we don't have enough room for that.
We used a Leap Motion, which is a hand tracking device.
And this was very interesting because that was the thing that the healthcare workers thought this would be most suitable. But then when we practiced this with the former patients and their relatives, they were very easily frustrated with it. So it was, I think it was too small, too much focused on the fine motor skills. Of course, you could make the game a bit different, but it also required the patient to have their hands within a certain area, which was a bit smaller than the VR headset. And for the what we discovered also is that it's really a benefit to be able to use the VR headset with the hand tracking, so we don't have to make use of this controller because of the limitation in the movement of the hands and the fingers that some of our patients have.
That's a good addition to add the Oculus. This one has hand tracking. So.
Yes. So
what I find interesting in your story is you said you have to fail as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But you're also doing your research. So how do you deal with the relatives, with the patients, with the nurses and other stakeholders? Because you know when you're gonna enter such a process that you would like to fail as soon as possible. So how do you deal with all those stakeholders and communication around that? I think that's a really interesting part.
That's an excellent question, and I think that we have a next phase, and then I would like to dive a bit deeper into the design process and also in how we approached and let's see how we used the stakeholders and their perspective and how we made them part of the process.
But I think, yes, the most important thing is that you have to create some space to try. So it is not like the old school research that you have one protocol and that is what you do and then you follow the protocol until the end. This is not the way that this works, because that means that if you start, for instance, with the VR, if we started with the VR headset or maybe with the sensor, because our colleagues thought that would be most suitable, the chances would be higher that we would have failed anyways, but then you already put in a lot of effort and then it doesn't fit with the needs of the patient. And that is, I think, our common goal, that we want to make sure that we develop something that doesn't end up somewhere in a closet or on a shelf. And we want to develop something that will be actually used. But that also requires some new ways of, well, designing and doing research.
Yeah.
And we'll go later on further in this design.
Yeah, at least in the process, but I think also good to mention is that we already had a few boundaries of what we wanted it to do. And but one of the things is that we wanted to measure the movements. So that's, of course, the examples that we show right now with sensor machinery, so high tech, but that was one of the requirements, as to say. Otherwise, we could have maybe even used a board game for hand exercises. But
but that is one of the things that was interesting to us, is that in the specific VR headset that we use, it has several cameras, so you can obtain position data on how someone is moving the hand. So here you can see a picture of the end product, or the product we have now, where patients can do a puzzle game, but puzzles can be anywhere. There's several levels, and I'm really happy with it. But it also means that we can, for instance, compare in the future if the movement of the left arm and the right arm are similar, or if there is a delay in one arm. And this gives a lot of potential for research, in my opinion, and it also reduces the burden for the patient, because they don't have to do manual testing besides this. Yeah.
And just because there's also a question from the audience, when were the patients involved? Because I heard relatives, nurses, physiotherapists. When did you test on the real target audience?
Yeah, so
the patients
I
or the
think
players?
really soon, because we started with the first brainstorm with the team and the colleagues, and then the next step was organizing this demonstration with the patients and the relatives. And then
directly combined.
Yes, and then of course during the first pilot study, we immediately started testing in the ICU department, and that is also something that is really important to us, but also to you if you start future projects that to increase, well, how it fits the patient's needs. I think it's important to include them from the first
in the early stage already. Okay. And for the academics in the audience, do you use the data which is now gained by the VR Brill? Do you use it?
Well, we have used.
Can you use it?
One of the things that we have used now is the actual time playing the game. We compared it to the time that it took for our researcher to supervise the patients in working with the game and the headset. And in the future, we are also looking into how we can use this position data in, for instance, measuring the movement speed, but also the range of movement. how high someone can lift their arms or how fast they can get to one of the blocks. But that will be for the next phase. Yes, and I think this is, you added this picture to the presentation, which is really nice, but I think you wanted to share that, you know, this wasn't just a side project. It is also a part of my PhD thesis. So with the information that you will share afterwards, even though it is a different way of doing research and designing, it doesn't mean it's less important or less of value than traditional research. I think it is the way forward in designing healthcare innovations that are relevant to our own patient groups. Do we have another question?
Yeah, we have quite a long question, so I will read it out loud. You say you don't need to manual testing anymore as the system can get some test results, but how about data on muscle strength? Can the system obtain that just from the patient's gaming?
No, the muscle strength measurements cannot be obtained from the VR headset. I think there are ways to do this, for instance, with specific gloves that you can use, or additional sensors. But what is important to mention is that we use this as an addition to the standard protocol, and we do measure muscle strength manually in the ICU.
So still manual.
Yes, but what we didn't measure was, for instance, well, mobility of the upper extremity, so the arms and the hands, but also not mobility of the fingers. And that is something that is very special to the sensor data of the headset, is that it can measure each compartment of the hand individually. So it can measure every finger, but also every part of
recognize the differences and the
yes.
different fingers.
Yeah, so there are some manual tests for hand and arm mobility, but I think they are less specific and also less easy to implement in the ICU.
Are there other questions from the audience about this specific project of Lise?
Yeah, we've been talking for a long time now, so if you would like to interact, feel free, and otherwise we will continue with the second part.
I don't think so, right?
Good questions thus far.
Yes,
This question.
I really like the questions. So it's really helpful to make it more clear.
Yeah.
But everyone wants to know how to do this, so that is why they cannot wait for you to tell
Well,
us.
Then you have come to the right place. So let me tell you,
Big expectations now.
All right.
No pressure.
No pressure.
All right. So to dive a bit deeper into the philosophy of the designing and why we did the steps that we did during the process of Lise's research, it's because we use design thinking. Design thinking at its core is the process of coming from a current situation in which, for instance, at the ICU, there has to be more support for the players in their home setting to rehabilitate, etc., to a desired situation in which this is happening, and how the gap that we have to cross is called the design gap. So within design thinking, it's not about painting a wall in design, but it's about really solving a problem. And as Carl already said it very nicely, design is giving form to artifacts that solve problems, in which artifacts is the naming of interventions that you create to solve this. So for instance, the VR application, the game, is the artifact in this case. The framework that has been is becoming the industry standard within design thinking is called the double diamond. In the double diamond process, you start, so as you can see, you still have the problem at the beginning and the solution at the end, so the desired situation. To cross this gap, you have to go through the two diamonds, in which in the first part of the diamond, you have to design the right thing. So fail early, try to see what the players need, what all the stakeholders need, what is the social context, and how can they contribute to what you want as a desired situation. If you have figured all this out, which can be done through co-creation, interviews, early prototyping, you have, well, made it more clear on which direction to go, but then you still have to make that one very good. So the second diamond is about design things right. The process of going through this design phase has been very well visualized as the squiggle by Daniel Newman. I always like this example. It can feel a bit like a swamp at the beginning. So you start off, you know a bit of the current situation, you know a bit about where you want to go, and how during your research further along you get all the information that you have collected and all the things that you have tried. It will feel like a swamp, like endless possibilities, which you can see very nicely at the beginning of the squiggle. And then eventually you, during the process of developing and designing, researching, you make it more clear until at the end you have a very nice product. But it's an illusion to think that it's a very straightforward process. You don't know what you don't know. So, and you will always learn new things. And you have to be adaptive to it.
Lise, did it feel like felt like this?
Yeah,
That's
it did, but it was also a bit of a relief, because sometimes, especially I think in medical research, when you have a set protocol, there's so little room to adjust to what happens. Of course, you have to, for those of you that are familiar with it, that whenever you have to have an adjustment to the protocol, you have to write an amendment or something. It's very difficult. So on the one hand, it was quite scary to get into this project, but on the other hand, it also gives you so much room to, well, this sounds a bit cheesy, but also to play, I think. And for me, that was a very nice, change of perspective. And it was also for me a very new and method to learn. So yeah, I think I was mostly very curious, and in my experience, most of my colleagues were as well. So that was a bit surprising to me, because yeah, you can also, for me, I thought maybe people would be a bit skeptical. But whenever you come with these games or testing the software, they are like, oh yeah, I want to try. So it also came with a lot of new energy, I think.
Everyone likes to play games, do some things.
Yeah, and especially during COVID, when things were quite complicated in the ICU, it was also a relief that we could work on something that was fun again. And we had a lot of support by AD Games. So that was, it never felt like we were doing the wrong thing. So
very nice. And maybe a few of you will feel what the next slide is about. But if you see the squiggle, and if you remember the double diamond I talked about before, it fits on it very well. So the beginning, as I said, you really try to learn what the right thing is, what the thing is you need to design, and then at the end you try to design it right. And it's not a linear process. All right, and co-creation is at the center of this. And also what you have seen during the research of Lise is that it was a very important element to get to an impactful and meaningful intervention. All right, well, it's enough of the slides.
Enough about design thinking. Thank you for this short explanation, masterclass design thinking and the double diamond. The slides are gone for a while, and we will dive deeper in your collaboration, because I think that's it could be, or I think it's quite unique that when you're doing your PhD already start working with the, I always call it the real world, with a commercial organization. How did that collaboration started? Is this, you met Johan, he didn't recognize you, and the second time, what happened? Why did you thought, okay, let's give it a try?
Well, I think the second time we met at a stakeholder meeting, I think organized by our faculty.
I remember that very well. Just
It's okay. but sometimes it's just like a sign, right? So then I think both of us thought we had to investigate what we could mean for each other, I think. And I was just very curious. So I think I don't know if it's very special to do this during a PhD. It's not the traditional way,
No,
maybe.
exactly. That's what I mean.
But
It's not traditional.
yeah,
Writing your chapters of your booklet.
yes, but I think already from an early start, we were doing a lot of outreach for our patient group because we had to learn from local initiatives. So we try to also visit some other research projects in the region, and that is where we first met. So somewhere in the neighborhood here in Leeuwarden. So you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was really excited about this, and I think I was lucky also that my supervisors and also the organizations that I worked with provided the opportunity for us to explore this, because that is also where it starts, right? So it started with my curiosity and our willingness, but also support from our department, the colleagues, and eventually some seed funding from the medical center.
But this is interesting, this support part, because I think that's really important when you're in a PhD position. Did you organize it yourself, or did your supervisor already knew Johan?
I don't think so, right?
I don't know.
No, I think
So
but
you
we were-
organized
yes,
this.
yes, I
That's
did.
an important part, maybe from the.
Yes, and that is also, I think, one of the nice opportunities that you have as a PhD researcher, that you have the room in 4 years to, of course, you have to produce a thesis, but you also have room to explore other options and investigate what you think can help your project. So, and that would be my invitation also to the PhDers that are here today. That you don't have to ask permission of your supervisors all the time. You can always also try and
Explore.
and maybe apologize afterwards if that is necessary.
And you already said there was some money available to get this project started. And then what happened? What did you have to develop a plan or write something down, or how did it process? Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So the Medical Center Leeuwarden is in Dutch they call it a top klinisch ziekenhuis. So it means basically that we are not a university hospital, but we are a hospital that focuses on education, research, and innovation. So for that, there is also some funding available. And together with our colleagues, we wrote an application with a short project description. And our innovation committee, we have an innovation committee, granted us some seed funding. I think it was 20,000, right?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And that was enough for us to to start development of the game. But I think before that, you already, because you were also, even in the beginning, we were co-creating without the funding. So you put in some voluntary hours, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So we looked into the opportunities to the seed fund together, and that is something that I really liked, that we met each other and we had this plan. But even before we had the funding, you and your colleagues were willing to put in time and effort.
And were you involved in writing this small proposal to the?
I think I'm not sure yet, but a lot of times we do.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I did this with during this process, but a lot of times, yeah, we support with writing up a proposal. Also because, well, if you want to, for instance, implement the design thinking process within your research, we know how this works, so we can support very well in how you write this down, that it fits into a larger research perspective. And also what I like very much about what you're saying, Lise, that we early on already started working together, even without the funding yet. Because I truly believe that a partnership should start equally. And creating impactful solutions is not about, okay, you tell me what to do and we only start running when there is budget. We have to have a shared vision and an idea of how to get there. And we need each other to achieve this goal.
And I think, yes, I agree. I think also, of course, you can, nowadays you can also order, well, starter packs with VR headsets or like games, which can be very suitable for certain target groups. But for our patient group, especially in the ICU, we just didn't know what would be suitable to them. So in this case, I think it was better to really start from scratch. Because at first we weren't even sure what hardware would be fitting, so what people would be able to use. So in that case, it was more it made more sense to start developing something new. But it doesn't mean that for every target group it is the best option, I think. But for ours it was, because
You're really starting co-creation, and that was also one of the questions from the audience, because Lisa is saying that co-creation is very nice and it delivers, or it can deliver valuable results, but it also takes a lot of time. How do you justify the cost of the hours that you have to make? I already heard there are voluntary hours. You are a commercial organization. You have limited time when you're doing your PhD. What is your vision on that? At first, Lisa, and then Johan.
Well, I think in my experience, it didn't take more time than, for instance, coordinating a randomized controlled trial. And the best thing is that, well, in the beginning, you put in a lot of effort and time in these the brainstorms and the demonstrations, but in the end, it will also make the chance that it sticks, so that it's something that is worthwhile and it's effective higher. So in a lot of other research projects, you do something, and then in the end, the results can be that it's not the way you should have done it, or it doesn't help, or whatever. So I think that is a balance between putting in maybe some more hours in the beginning, more like centered, because in the end, I think the developing was mostly done by you, and then we had some checkups, but it wasn't really time consuming.
And more brains are thinking about the same problem as well. Is that also, because also the creative analyzing the problem, asking questions, which.
Well, you get more direct input, and because you involve the stakeholders throughout the process, I think it is you put in more value in the product that you develop. Also, you make sure that it does fit the needs of the target group better, because that is one of the things that also, because we don't have enough time usually in medical research, we usually stick to developing something that we think is important for our patients. So we develop rehabilitation programs because we think it is important to our patients that they lose weight or they gain muscle.
Top down.
Yes,
approach.
but that doesn't really mean that this is also important to the patients, I think. So, well, for me, it didn't feel like there were more hours to put in. But yeah, I think it also depends a bit on the project that you are developing.
Anything to add?
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you for that. I think that all the time that you put into a concept that eventually doesn't work is a waste of time. So you need to find out very early on which you can't do without your target audience or other important stakeholders. So this also means, for instance, if in the example of the ICU setting, you also need to talk to, I don't know, the organization that facilitates the room. What type of hardware and how does it interfere with the other hardware in the ICU? You need to consider all these elements, but most importantly, the needs of the target audience. And if you go past this and you create something that no one will use, it's all a waste of time.
So creating value for society is also a big driver.
Definitely.
But I see also that, for instance, because within a PhD you might have a bit more room than, for instance, someone that is working in the hospital, or this is a side project just next to your 40-hour
job.
yes, your day job. So that is why I think PhD projects are very good option for these kinds of development processes, because also even if the end product, even if you don't manage to test the end product in the desired situation, there are a lot of opportunities to perform research. So we didn't do it, but you could also perform research, qualitative research around the whole designing process, around the whole co-creation theme, and maybe even look into observations or use the specific steps within the design thinking method to give a voice to your stakeholder group. So there are a lot of opportunities, and yeah.
And only using, there's also a lot of topics around which could be
Yes,
academically relevant and interesting, and also societal relevant. Okay, and then we already talked a little bit about involving the patients, or as Johan called it, the players in this gaming process. But how do you find participants? How do you find volunteers for your research?
Well, for us it wasn't that hard, because we have for our ICU we have an outpatient clinic. So after 3 months, people visit our hospital for a checkup or to see the ICU ward again, to help with recovery. So we see them again. But also within the research project, we already had some patients that were more actively involved. So I think that is also a trend in general with research, that it is more and more desirable to include the target group in all projects. So a lot of funding bodies also ask for participation of former patients or relatives or something like that. So we already had a bit of a structure, but we also did some student projects, and they try to ask other healthcare workers about the VR, use of VR, or for people in the neighborhoods. And the thing with the VR headset is that it's a bit like a fly trap. So everyone is, when you walk in with a VR headset, also in the office, and people are like,
running.
What are you doing? Can I try? So I think it also sparks some curiosity. So maybe whatever tool or hardware you're going to use, if you're looking for participants, just walk around your department or your institution
item
with this thing. So it wasn't really that much of a problem for us.
No, and I think in addition to this, if you are not the one who is close to the target audience that you are researching or working on, it's good to have a few ambassadors within the organization that you want to work with. For instance, if you have an ambassador like Lise within your research, then this ambassador can help you with finding the correct test group, committee, etc. And to create these ambassadors, I would advise co-creating together and to give them a saying into your project, which gives them a form of ownership. And you will see this result coming back to you during your research.
Yeah, and I think that also involving them also means that you really have to listen to people that participate in this process, because often patients or target groups are also included in the discussion, but then the feedback that they give aren't incorporated in the product. So one of the examples that we found out in the demos was that we developed, we tested existing games. They were in English, and we thought already like, oh yeah, we have to develop it in Dutch. But one of the participants was like, why isn't it just in Fryslan? So of course, why is it in Fryslan? I didn't even think of it, but then I think that was such an important thing that you helped us to facilitate this together with the province of Fryslân. And now we also have a Frisian version of the game.
And this is also one of the examples that I mean by you don't know what you don't know. That Frisian for the players in the hospital in Leeuwarden, where everybody in the province goes if they have a more complex situation. A lot of them speak Frisian as their mother tongue.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Co-creation is the keyword. We have also a couple of questions from the chat. What is the status of your project, Lise?
Well, we completed the first pilot study, and we first tested if it was feasible to use the VR headset in the ICU. So as soon as the patients were awake, we asked them if they wanted to try, and that is what we tested. So that was the first step. Afterwards, we used the feedback and the observations from this study in a first update. Is that right? Well, so you made some adjustments. We added, one of the main things that we added is a companion app, so that we could also we were already able to see what the patient was seeing on the tablet, because that is one of the things that you can do with the Oculus headset. But now we can also control, for instance, the amount of puzzle pieces that someone sees with the app, which is very helpful. And the second step now is that on the one hand, we are setting up a project where we are going to test the effect of the training on arm and hand function. And we are looking for, we want to do that not only in the medical center in Leeuwarden, but also in some other hospitals, so we can compare. And on the other hand, we are looking into the business case, for instance, what maybe we will talk about later, but also how we can train our colleagues in the hospital and colleagues in other hospitals to use the VR headset, because that is one of the things that is important with these tools, so that people have enough skills and they need some supervision or help with the training so they can independently use the headset. Because now the previous study was conducted by one of our researchers and by me. But in the end, we of course want to facilitate that people can just get one of the headsets from the shelf and use it whenever they have a patient that they care for that is interested in this form of training.
Do you still need to participate in hospitals?
Well, people that are interested can also always send me an email. And I think one of the other questions was if you can see the project somewhere. I think there's a video on your YouTube page, right?
Definitely. Maybe good to know. We will send for everyone who has registered to the webinar a information email with also the slides, and we will also add this to the resources. So the information on the project.
Yeah, and also the contact details of Lise and Johan and for myself will also be there. I heard you said business case. That's interesting.
Well, don't ask me.
Johan.
Very important.
Yeah.
So, and of course, that's one of my roles in this process. You have to understand that there are a lot of developments going on, a lot of innovative projects, and from what we see, a lot of them end up on the shelf. And one of the main reasons for this is that they start thinking about a business case too late. You need to start thinking about a business case for your project to really sustainable embed it into a larger structure. You need to start with that from the beginning. So also during the research project, you need to look at ways how to make it sustainable, implementable, for instance, at the ICU setting.
Is that a trade-off in this designing phase? Because I can imagine Lise would like to have this academic result, must be academically interesting and good for the patient. Well, you also have this commercial vision of things.
I think it makes the process even more clear. So you can also already advise into, well, things that have been done before, which we know from our field of expertise, that don't work out later on. And you can it's better to understand this in the beginning, so you don't have to waste resources on solutions that will not be embedded.
So transparency is also is key in that sense.
And I also think that talking about a business case in a way as how to make impactful solutions, because eventually you have to embed it somewhere. And if it can't live on itself, it's not sustainable. So to make research impactful, you have to really in the beginning already start working together, collaborate on this. And I think this is also a very nice, separation of skills, because of course we as a serious gaming company are not the research experts. We know enough to combine the research, to apply it, and to advise, but to do the actual research at the academic level, we need the research experts.
You need both worlds.
Exactly. And we can keep a more holistic view on how to embed it in the long run.
And I think, of course, I made a joke that you shouldn't ask me about this, but we did discuss it. And I think one of the things is that we are trying to do also together with experts within our hospital is to look into ways that it is also feasible for the organization. Because of course, there are some setups or like ways to do this. You can provide packages with headsets or like a lease thing. But you also want to find a way where our hospital, but also other hospitals, will be able to do this for the longer time. So that is why we are constantly talking about this, and we did discuss firsthand our expectations around the business case. But we are still looking for the best format for this game. And also for the long term with the Medical Centrum Leeuwarden, because we did this project together, but you are also involved in some other projects in the hospital. So I think it is important that, as you said, you have the expertise of the business side, we do the research, but also within the hospital, there usually are people that have expertise in which things they can buy as a hospital, what is a sustainable solution for instance, also the maintenance of the headset. So this is where we look for other collaborators in this within our organization. So
and changing topics, switching topics, the ethical side of this this kind of research, you work with really personal data. Are there any barriers from the GDPR regulation or those kind of things? And ethical committees are also always interesting in such cases. How do you deal with that?
Of course, all the research projects that we do in the medical center have to have an ethical check. So for the first pilot study, we just followed the usual procedures. The people that are involved in the research have the necessary diplomas or followed the courses that we have to do. But of course, with the use of hardware and gaming, even though the headset has been used in healthcare for a while, there are still some things that you have to take into account, because as a research institute, it is important, especially when you work with patients, that you also are able to collect and store all the data. And that is also something that we have been working on with the raw data that the headset uses. So those are things that you have to think about. And I think it's also a hot topic because with the e-health and the digitalization of healthcare, there are a lot of companies that are investing in specific hardware to monitor or to facilitate rehabilitation. And the most important thing for us is, of course, that we keep the patient data safe. Of course, in the headset, there are no personal data of the patients, but still you have this location data, the movement. So that is why we also want to further develop a way how we can use this data for healthcare purposes. So it's not only data for you or like stored in the headset.
No, at its core, you have to give the ownership of the data to the players. And they can decide if they want it there or not. And otherwise,
Share it,
to share it with us if they want.
to share it for research.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Are there questions from the, no, not from the chat? Then we will go on to the testing and implementation phase. That's interesting. What was the biggest barrier? Johan, first you, because Lise is talking for 8.
I know.
Johan,
It's Lisa's special.
yeah.
That's barriers.
That's all.
Talking.
Johan, barriers in this collaboration, in this co-creation.
Let me think. The greatest barriers I think were, well, of course, in the beginning you want to, you are a bit hesitant, you know, to start testing on a fragile target audience, which they are, and then you really want to do this very cautiously, and I think that was a barrier that I had in mind, but it turned out to go very well. So I think that's one of the main surprises. Yeah.
Did you have the same, or did you have other struggles or barriers?
Well, I recognize what Johan says because, of course, when you think about using VR or putting stuff,
Patients from
Yeah.
ICU.
I know you put them in like a virtual room.
Yep.
The people that are familiar with well, critically ill patients know that sometimes they are also confused or they experience delirium. And the first thing that we and my colleagues thought, well, if we put the headset on their head, will they become more confused? Will that have adverse effects on them? But of course, we took that into account. So that is why also we did the demos, and we also for the first pilot we excluded people that were having active delirium to be safe. Although I think in the future that might be an option to also study this kind of intervention with these patients. But it wasn't my main barrier that I thought of, because I think the barrier for me was mostly I think within the hospital, more the IT side, and I think that is also something that some of you might recognize, that things are developing so fast, and our hospitals or organizations sometimes are just not prepared to facilitate the needs when it comes to digitalization or e-health within the hospital. So one example, which is a bit silly, is that for casting from the VR headset to the tablet, you need Wi-Fi connection. You can also do it in a different way. That's what we figured out now. But at first we wanted to do that via Wi-Fi, but then it turned out that the settings of our Wi-Fi to keep other appliances and data safe didn't allow appliances to cast to another appliance. And that is quite difficult to fix, it turned out. So I thought it would be quite easy, but then that was one of
Quite difficult. It's
quite
such a silly
difficult,
thing,
yes.
but
Because then, you ask this, and then you ask for the IT department to make one exception, but they also know that this will be the future, so they have to make a structural change to the system to facilitate the use of VR, but also other tools within the hospital's network.
and do you need METC approval for these type of studies? I don't know what this abbreviation is for. Maybe you do.
That's medical ethical committee, the toetsing in Dutch. Well, for the first study, for the pilot, we received a waiver. So the METC said that this was a non-WMO study. So that means we didn't have to go through the full ethical procedure. They only we had to hand in a protocol, and they assessed if it was a WMO study, and they said it wasn't. But for the follow-up study, we will. So it depends a bit. Also, we were lucky that the VR headsets were also already used in other departments. So we could argue that the headset itself was already used. We just wanted to test it in a new population, and it was not a new treatment, but it was a new way to provide already existing physical therapy. But sadly it depends a bit on the METC that you are working with. So I think they don't have very strict regulations about this yet.
And for me, as a non-academic, this procedure is quite difficult to proceed.
Well, if you have to go for a full procedure, then it can take a lot of time, yes.
So it has some consequences.
Yes, and then it also means that you have to provide some more documents. So if you go for the WMO studies, it's a bit easier.
Okay. Other question: are there in and exclude criteria for the participating patients, for example, with regard to sight of hearing or cognitive ability?
Well, we for the first pilot study, of course, it wasn't possible for patients to participate if they couldn't see sufficiently. So I think they need to be able to see their hands and the puzzle pieces. A funny thing is that at first we didn't have an exclusion criteria for being able to use hands, and then we stumbled upon a patient that wasn't able to use one of the arms. So then we had to make an adjustment. So then we adjusted the game in also making it possible to do it with one arm, because first it was with two arms. For the pilot study, we excluded patients that were having yes. And because the information about the study was in Dutch, that was also one of the exclusion criteria. They had to be able to understand Dutch, which doesn't have to be the case, because you can also make the patient information in English, of course. But we don't have a lot of English speaking
in the region, more Fryslan, right?
Yes.
There are also some questions from the audience which they have sent in before the webinar started. This one is for Johan. Could serious gaming also be applied to healthcare education aside from research? And can you think about how would such a educational model look like?
Yeah, very nice question. If you are here, thank you. I think it's nice to know, hot from the press, is that the MCL has started a alliance with the NIL Standard, the University of Applied Sciences here, for working on simulation-based healthcare education. So I think it's a good time to ask this question, because the answer is yes. And they are looking at, they are going to use virtual reality to simulate certain situations, and in this case to train upcoming doctors, nurses, professionals in healthcare in certain situations, which would take a lot of resources to organize in real life. So for instance, reanimation, if I use a correct translation. Resuscitation, thank you. Exercises. I think a lot of protocol-based professional things you need to do can be very well translated into a simulated situation with virtual reality. And you can create a safe space to experiment as well. So if you want to do things that you could otherwise not try in a realistic setting, you could try that in virtual reality without actually hurting someone.
Yeah, because the resuscitation usually people do that with the dolls, right? But it doesn't really look real. So that's why you also developed already one of the examples,
Yeah.
right?
Very true.
Maybe you can share something.
Yeah,
about it?
definitely. So we have with child doctors at the MCO,
Pediatrician.
pediatricians. I'm sorry for
All those medical terms. That's why Lise is here, right?
Child-
I know more
People will understand.
terms on design and games
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff
No, no problem.
and sensors.
We have an expert here.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
Experts on different sides, co-creation, also in this
With my Google Translate.
live.
We have created in combination with pediatricians a virtual reality training for the
Resuscitation.
situation in which resuscitation is needed for children that have been born that need this. So it's a very critical state, so newborn children. And if they need to do this, of course, they have to be well trained. But to do this training beforehand, you need to organize that a person goes to the hospital that can give this training, and all the doctors need to be available at the same time to do this protocol-wise exercise, which of course a lot of time is not feasible to facilitate because doctors are very busy and they are very they have a lot of things to do. So to facilitate this and to, for instance, make it so that they can train individually as well, you can use simulation-based education, for instance, with the VR headset.
And the thing is, of course, when you talk about this resuscitation of babies, and of course you can train on the doll and read about certain signs that you can recognize well when the baby is not doing well. But in your game you can also see this, for instance, that the baby is changing color, or so you can combine the written part, which people have to remember, and
Visual.
the visual part. So I think that is also a more realistic experience, and also might especially prepare people that don't have real life experience with something like that for the moment that it will happen to them in real life. Because that, of course, when you see a baby turning blue or purple, whatever, that is a bit unsettling to see. So then it is beneficial to already have seen something similar, quite realistic in VR. With the game.
Yeah, very true, and also to exercise with the hardware that you need to use. This is also implemented. Yeah, good question.
Very nice.
Very nice question. Yeah, I have another one, and we touched up on it already a little bit, but maybe you can add something. What are the applications and different scenarios in serious gaming? Is it always in the VR form? You have the board game, but are there other things?
Yeah, I think to keep in mind is that from a design perspective, the gamification, the serious game is the form. It is not the end goal. So we use the motivating aspects of gamification and serious games to motivate certain behavior, to transfer knowledge, and you can use this in a variety of fields. And we do this a lot in healthcare, in education, but it has been used in, for instance, team training, soft skill training.
A lot of different.
Yeah, I think here in, for instance, here also in the Fryslan, they also use different forms of gamification and teaching. So it has a lot of potential, and there are a lot of possibilities.
A lot, and maybe also there are, for instance, escape rooms based around creating empathy for people who are having dementia, and how can you support them, and how does it feel for someone like that?
That's maybe because the second question from this participant was, can it be applied for mental health scenarios? But the answer is yes. Do you have some experience from AD games with this aspects as well?
Yeah, so also serious games are being used in a lot of also mental health situations. So for instance, if you have a certain in the field of lifestyle, for instance, so to improve on more exercising or healthy diets, but also to train certain behavior on, for instance, addictions that people have, alcohol or other more heavy addictions. And you can use serious gaming, and it is being used more often to support in, for instance, well, these types of trainings for mental health. Yeah.
And I think
So,
also there are several in hospital, several ways in which, for instance, virtual reality can be used for this, because as you can distract people very well, it can also be used to manage pain, or I know that psychologists also use it for trauma therapy, so exposure. There are a lot of options. Of course, not all of them are in gaming form, because sometimes it's just relaxation or watching a video or a movie in VR. But the nice thing about VR, but also about serious gaming, is that you don't have to think that your idea is impossible, because
Everything is possible.
everything is possible.
It's
Like
virtual.
99% of the things are possible.
You
Of
can go
course
to the moon in VR.
Yeah, you can put your colleagues in a roller coaster, and then they get a bit nauseous, but you can do anything.
Yeah. That's a nice thing. I have one other question. Someone who says, I've been hearing that the current state of VR is not where healthcare companies hope for it would be 4 or 5 years ago. And a lot of companies and people are now looking at a 5-year time frame before VR will have another growth. Search instead of the half a year previously hoped, or 1-2 years or half a year previously hoped for. I'm wondering, what do you think about whatever you notice this is the healthcare VR space?
Yeah, very good question. Of course, disclaimer: I can't look into the future. I can.
You don't have this glass.
No, unfortunately not. I can give an opinion based on what I've seen. And what I thought was very interesting was, maybe a few of you have seen it, is the latest presentation of Apple with their new vision glasses. Funny thing is, they don't mention XR or VR anywhere in their presentation, but that's what it is. But they claim it as something completely new, which Apple does. And it's a very
It's really a personal opinion.
yeah. But that doesn't matter, because the vision glasses that they presented, I think this is one. This will be a next step in making it more suitable for different healthcare situations in XR, with very well integrated extended reality. So apologies for not explaining. They can add into a existing situation the virtual layer. So in this case, you don't have to be totally separated from reality.
A bit like Pokemon Go, right?
It's like Pokemon Go, but then with glasses, and it creates a lot of more possibilities to support in healthcare and also in education as well. We need to see how consumer friendly it will be. I have seen the prognosis of the price, which will be too high for most. Mostly it is with Apple products, but I think it will be a very good next step.
So in a couple of years, I also wear glasses, but then not for my eyes, but for
No.
adding this layer.
Yeah, exactly. And it will go very fast. So I think in 5 years, if you look back 5 years ago, then I think you would still be surprised at what the hardware can do right now. Yeah.
And
So
I think
it's
that's
going very fast.
that is one of the things you always have to keep into mind with doing these things. It's a bit naive to think that a hospital can be can catch up with all the tech companies, I think. So the only thing that you can do is keep an open mind and already think about ways in which your game or your application can be adjusted or used in the next generation of the tool that you are using. So what Johan mentioned is very true. So we also look for VR headsets in this case that are affordable for the hospital, but also maybe for healthcare insurance or patients in the future. So that's always something that you have to consider with the accessibility of what you develop. But we are already discussing the ways in which our game can also be used on different VR headsets, so like the Pico, that is something that has to be part of, I think, your project planning.
Yep, definitely.
So it's a long-term collaboration. So
yeah, we
have
have
to.
Which
Yeah,
every
there
good
is.
partnership should aim to be.
yes, I think so too.
Thank you. I was wondering if there are any questions from the audience. Could you please provide a brief overview of the game? What is it about? What's the goal? And what does the patient need to do?
Very good question.
You think all the questions are good?
Yeah, I think they are excellent question. Well,
We have an
okay.
excellent audience.
Yeah.
So that's,
Well, the game that we developed is the aim of the game is to train arm and hand function, and the game that we developed is a puzzle game. So basically, there are different levels. From in the start, patients just have to move their arms over a table. So we made sure that when a patient is in the bed or in the chair, there's always this surface that we can use, like a little table or like the addition to the rehabilitation chair. The first level, they only have to touch certain puzzle pieces, and the puzzle pieces highlight in a color which implies which hand they have to use if they are using two hands. But we also have more levels, so the more advanced, the maximum level patients have to reach the arms up, and then they have to touch a puzzle piece. Then the puzzle piece will fall. Sometimes they have to flip the puzzle piece to make this rotation movement and put it in the frame. So that is what they do. And the nice thing is that Johan and colleagues already designed a very relaxing environment. So the game is situated in a living room on a kitchen table, which is very familiar and also a bit in 70s style, I think. So that is very well suitable for our patient group. And for the puzzles, they sometimes make puzzles with sailboats, but also with nature pictures on it. So that is the game as it is now.
So even though the hardware is high tech, the things that they need to do are very recognizable.
Yes, and we used specific physical therapy exercises to look for the motions that they had to do. So moving the arm over the table, but also lifting the arm and rotating the hands. And now with the update, we are able to adjust the game that people have to hold the arms up. And then the puzzle piece will shake a bit for 5 seconds, for instance, and then the puzzle will drop. So you can also practice holding up the arms a bit more.
so that is based on what they need to do for their recovery from the.
Yes, and what the nice thing was, in one of the brainstorm sessions, we first came up with a lot of ideas, and then we sorted these ideas in what was absolutely necessary and less necessary, and then easy to do or a bit difficult.
Yep.
So in this way, we also managed to select which compartments of the game were essential to do immediately, and which ones would be nice to have. So one of the things that we were talking about for the future, it would be nice to maybe have some pictures of relatives or something or a dog or whatever that the patient is fond of in the room.
Yeah.
But another option would be playing music that they like to make them feel more comfortable.
To personalize.
Yeah, to
And
personalize
I
it.
think a very nice aspect in this idea is also that if you give these tools to, for instance, the circle of influence for this patient, so a partner or the children or grandchildren, you can give them also tools to support in a situation which can be very difficult to support to if you don't know how.
Mhm.
So, and this is important in the whole scope of, well, the social context and motivation for rehabilitation. Yeah.
I see that we have another question. I think it's do you think serious gaming can be part in the hospital itself? For example, I once hear someone hypothesize using VR an interface for surgery, not training, the actually thing. Do you ever seen such a thing happening?
Yeah, so in the form of gaming then, or as a extension to the work?
Extension to the work, I think
Yeah.
that's what was meant.
I have seen examples. I have seen examples of new virtual reality and extended reality glasses being used to
Do the surgery.
yeah, not doing the surgery, but for instance, to compare scans or other visual data, which can be structured then beforehand with AI. So in this case, you can combine different technologies for, well, facilitating your needs. So I have seen it, but have you seen it being used at the MCL? Maybe that's a better question.
Well, only in the training scenarios, but I can think of ways in which maybe you can combine it in the future.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's still early, at least for the Netherlands.
Well, it would be very beneficial, for instance, when you are doing surgeries and without opening up someone's anatomy. So then you can see with the VR or with the XR, see what is happening inside, right? Because now people see it on a screen or
Actually seeing it in 3D
yes.
layered. Can be.
But I haven't heard of it yet in the MCL, and if it is there and I don't know if it, then I apologize.
That would be
yes.
That would be true. Other questions from the chat? Let's see a compliment and that they and that's the type of research. No, shall we go on with the slides? If there are any questions, there is some time for questions, so please put your questions in the chat. And we will share some final slides again, also giving the time.
Time flies when you're
Time flies when you have fun and talking about VR.
I hope you had the same as viewers.
I hope so too. We have added some QR codes in the slides, which you can scan with your mobile phone, where you go automatically to the website of AD Games, the company where Johan is from, and the other one is working together with the faculty, comes Fryslân, and also there are the contact details of Lise. So that's important to know. And also a lot of examples that came by are on the website, because I saw some people saying, can we see it? Is there more information? Can we see patients doing it? I think your website is filled with examples.
Yeah, very true. But we will facilitate this and also send it over to you after the webinar.
Yeah.
But of course, feel free to browse the website. A lot of the examples we have talked about, you can see in more detail there.
Yeah. And if you miss things, just send an email to Johan.
That's
and I
always
think
perfect.
also if you feel free to get in touch with us if you have an idea but you don't know where to start, and
Or
I
you
think
have to read your chapter about VR.
But I think we are here because we are very passionate about this, and there's no I don't think we feel a lot of competition or whatever, protection over the project. So I think collaboration is a good way forward. So if you have an idea and you want to get in touch with us, then please do so.
Please do.
And if I may add to that, if you use the QR code from me at the left for our Games in Research page, for this webinar, I would like to give away 3 problem storms from AD Games. So if you go to the site, you can fill in the research question or problem that you are working on, and we will randomly pick 3 of them. For this, we will facilitate a problem storm in which we dive into the problem that you try to solve or the research question that you have using design thinking methods, and to really make a good start with a creative process. And of course, at the end, you can do with that what you want. We hope to inspire and to give you some solid foundation for further steps. Yeah.
I see another question from Alejandro. Have you considered experimenting with the Quest Pro and the video pass-through?
Not yet, but thank you for the idea. There are a lot of different hardwares to use, and it's good to know them all and also to know their limitations to really advise you. Thank you, Alejandro. I will look into that.
Great. Other things, did I forget something that you would like to share with the audience, Johan, Lise?
Now we have a final slide for connecting personally.
Doesn't work. Now it works. There we are. The 3 QR codes for our LinkedIn, I think, and our contact details are also there on our LinkedIn pages.
Yep.
So please feel free. I really would like to thank you for the great questions, great interaction, and for attending this webinar. And of course, thank you, Johan and Lise, for being here and sharing all your experience on VR and serious gaming.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Yes, it was. Thank you for the hosting coordination.
Thank you for the hosting
Yes.
and for the backstage technical
Yeah,
support,
yes.
Lieke, which is also here.
Yeah,
you
also
all.
really important. Yeah, thank you. And it was a pleasure.
Yes,
And we will hang around for some final questions. And in 5 minutes we will close the call.